How's it going, everybody? It's Gregor, aka Enzo Ferrari, and in this video, in the same vein of many content speculation videos I've done in the past, I'm going to be talking about how the Italians could be featured in World of Warships. This has been one of the most widely requested pieces of subject matter for this series, and I'm more than happy to finally put it out for you guys. Like with the French, I'm going to give you an idea of this tech tree's battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Let's get into it. Italy is often the butt of many a World War II joke, a bit unfairly, if you ask me. I mentioned World War II, but Italian ships were involved in the First World War as well, mainly in the Adriatic Sea, fighting the Austro-Hungarian Navy. Still, the Regia Marina was a serious force to be feared in the Mediterranean Sea. During the Second World War, many of the war's most powerful battleships flew Italian colors. Italian naval architects also provided the basis for many designs to other nations, and its shipyards were often used to build ships for other nations as well, particularly destroyers. Since Italy had so many destroyers, and would probably be the tech tree's most fleshed out line, let's mix things up and start with them first. Italy was known for its building of so-called large destroyers, which were built in response to French ships of the same design principle. Large destroyers function in a sort of midway point between cruisers and destroyers, as most people would think of them. During World War II, Italian destroyers were mainly responsible with patrolling the supply lines between Africa and Italy. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to talk about low-tier large destroyers, some notable World War II era ships, and the Tier 10 candidate. I have a lot of material here to work with, and it would be impossible to go over all of it in a timely manner, but I hope these highlights are sufficient. Large destroyers would likely lead up to Tier 5. A good Tier 3 would be the Cortatone class and the 4 ships built in her name. They all had pretty arduous service records. They'd share a lot of similarities to the Palestro class of ships that would likely precede them at Tier 2. Cortatone destroyers would be slower than their counterparts, though only slightly at 32 knots. 2 dual-barreled turrets mounted with 102mm guns. Gun caliber then comparable to most destroyers at that tier, but she'd be equipped with the most guns at that tier. She was also equipped with 2 triple-tube torpedo launchers. I can see this ship's role consisting of finishing off wounded enemies and dealing with other destroyers. Going further down the line would find noticeable differences with the Dardo class, which would function at Tier 5 effectively. Dardo class destroyers were built primarily as escorts for the Zara class heavy cruisers coming into play at the time. 8 ships were made of this class, divided into 2 more classes, the first series being the Dardo and the other being the Folgore class. Though the Folgore is notable because of her actions before her sinking in '42. She was engaged in combat with 4 different vessels from British and Canadian naval forces, and fired every single shell and torpedo in her arsenal, sinking afterwards due to extensive damage. Her captain was awarded posthumously the highest Italian military medal, and had a ship named after him afterwards. Anyways, characteristics. These ships pick up the pace and are capable of reaching a top speed of 38 knots. The gun configuration would be the same though, 2 dual-barreled 120mm turrets and 2 triple-tube torpedo launchers. Though this wouldn't really be an issue since the 120s mounted on these ships had better penetration characteristics and the like in comparison to earlier tiers. These being the Maestrali, the Oriani, and the Soldati. The Soldati stands out the most among these ships and it'd likely be at Tier 7. 12 of these ships were made and 8 of them were lost during the war, again mostly responsible for escorting convoys. A max speed of 38 knots like preceding ships, an additional 120mm gun for a total of 5, and a plethora of AA guns. She's middle of the pack in terms of speed at her tier, though the incredibly quick Russians skew the data just a little bit. I mentioned that additional 120mm gun, but it was actually reserved for firing illumination rounds. I don't know if Wargaming would implement the ship and just make it capable of firing HE and AP regardless. My knowledge on whether this is possible or not is limited. Anyway, moving on. Just thought I ought to mention it. You may notice that the ships in this line seem a little bit samey as we go along. 120mm guns, 6 torpedo tubes, 38 knots. If anything, if you're the kind of person who doesn't like going down progression lines that change ship characteristics drastically as you go, then this line might be for you, but a more noticeable shift would occur at Tiers 9 or 10. Tier 10 would likely host the Capitania Romani. This ship was built in response to the French Fantasca and the Mogador class ships. This ship was a force to be reckoned with in reality, and I imagine it would be respectable in game as well. She has a potent set of high caliber guns, 4 twin-barreled 135mm turrets, and she bristles with anti-aircraft guns. Torpedo armament consists of 8 torpedo tubes mounted in 2 mounts, so 4 tubes each. Despite the ship's size and displacement, she could reach a speed of up to 40 knots, so the only ship that would be faster at her tier would be the Russian Khabarovsk as of now. The Tier 10, though, represents the Italian destroyer line pretty well. In-game, most of these ships, including the Tier 10 then, would be great destroyer hunters and support ships for larger vessels like carriers and battleships. There are plenty of ships on offer here, and I can't wait to see them implemented in-game. Anyway, let's move on to battleships. So battleships are also a very, very well-known class of Italian warship. For the purposes of this video, I'll be going over the Tier 3 start of the line, and a couple mid and later tier ships. Italian battleships gained more attention during the Second World War than they did during the First, in terms of reputation and combat performance. Still, the line's got to start with those earlier ships, and one Italian naval officer has a significant stake in the Dreadnought's development, one Vittorio Cuniberti. Cuniberti visualized a concept for a so-called all-big-gun fighting ship, or in other words, something that carried only one type of gun on board. Big. In his eyes, this dream ship would carry 12-inch guns and would be fast enough to choose the point of attack that it wished. This design on paper was never actually built due to cost constraints, but the basic idea proved to be the basis of future Italian designs. Indeed, if this ship had been built before the HMS Dreadnought herself, it would have been Italy, not the UK, that would have been given credit for starting the naval arms race of the early 20th century. I reckon this paper design could function properly at Tier 3. Either this or the first Italian dreadnought to be properly built, the Dante Alighieri, though she's honestly better off at Tier 4 than Tier 3, in my honest opinion. Another famous Italian battleship is the Andrea Doria class, referred to by the Italians as the Caio Duilio. Though built during World War I, these ships continued to exist with refits over the course of several years, and were involved in a number of international incidents during the interwar period. Another famous set of ships would be the Conte di Cavour class that preceded it, and they were also extensively modified to serve in World War II. Honestly, both of these ships, in their upgraded configurations, could work at Tier 5. The Conte di Cavour had a top speed of 28 knots, a main belt consisting of about 250mm of armor, and 320mm guns, arranged in an interesting manner. 2 turrets were arranged at the front and back of the ship, one of them being dual-barreled and the other being triple-barreled, so 10 guns total. Caio Duilio, with her refits, had the same sort of gun configuration as the Conte di Cavour ships, as well as 12 135mm secondary batteries, compared to the 12 120s of the other. The two ships also shared identical armor characteristics, though the Caio Duilio was a bit slower than the Conte di Cavour by a couple knots. So as you can see here, like the French, the Italians like their battleships to move reasonably quick. In fact, they'd feature some of the fastest battleships in the game, this of course sacrificing gun caliber. What would likely be the reason people go down the Italian battleship line, though, would be the most powerful of battleships that they ever produced, the fearsome Littorio or Vittorio Veneto class. Littorio was built in response to the French Dunkirk designs, with 3 of them being built. All of them proved to be exceptionally tough vessels, 2 of them enduring multiple torpedo impacts over the course of their lifespans. A quick top speed of about 30 knots, 9 15-inch guns mounted in triple-barreled turrets, 2 of them at the front and the other one at the back. She also had a great deal of secondary batteries, and I can't think of any destroyers at her tier trying to pick a fight with her at close range, unless they have very ample cause to do so. Her armor belt consists of a 280mm belt, with a set of spaced armor about 70mm in length, so effectively 350mm overall. Anti-aircraft armament is adequate, and gun caliber would balance out her alpha damage a bit. But overall, the Littorio was a powerful ship in the war, and would be a powerful ship at Tier 8, I'd imagine. Can't wait to take her out for a spin. Overall, Italian battleships were fast and reasonably armored, much like the French. They'd be particularly potent at fighting cruisers and destroyers, while still being able to fight other battleships under the right conditions. An Italian battleship line would also be very easy to build and implement, and I'm sure they'd be one of the more popular sets of ships in-game when introduced. Now, let's move on to cruisers. Italian cruisers are a pretty easy manner to introduce in-game as well. It'd also be where we start the tech tree in full with a Tier 1. A good candidate for a Tier 1 Italian vessel to me looks like the Eritrea, a sloop designed to patrol colonies in northern Africa, like many of the Tier 1s we already have in-game. She'd have 4 120mm guns, mounted in dual-barreled turrets. Her speed is comparable to the American Erie. Armor is a bit difficult to find on this ship though, but it's a Tier 1. It's there. I thought I'd show you some pictures of it. So there you go. Now, we'll take a big jump over early tiers to Tier 5, where the first real noteworthy Italian cruiser lies. This is the Dagiossano class. The ship was built as a result of the usual competition between France and Italy at the time. The ship was lacking in armor, but not so much in terms of speed or armament. 8 152mm guns in 4 twin-barreled turrets. She was also equipped with a very strong set of secondary guns, 6 100 mils, as well as good AA firepower and 4 torpedo tubes in dual tube mounts. This ship is also incredibly quick at about 36.5 knots. So think of the ship as a destroyer killer through and through. Her armor is paper thin, but she bristles with guns and is incredibly quick, likely the fastest of Tier 5 cruisers. At Tier 6 would be where the Italian cruisers get a little bit more armor, and such lies with the Montecuccoli class. She has a layered armor belt with an outer line set of 60mm and the inner layer being a 25mm set. Reasonable deck armor, and her citadel is protected by an armored box of 20mm. In those ways, then, Montecuccoli indicates a dramatic shift in Italian cruiser development. In terms of speed, once again very fast, capable of moving at 37 knots, faster than other Tier 6 cruisers. She's equipped with 6-inch guns mounted in 4 dual-barreled turrets, which is standard for light cruisers of the time, and her secondary battery is identical to the ship before it at Tier 5. Her AA is not too bad either, and she's equipped with 2 torpedo tubes on each side. Not a lot, but torpedoes are torpedoes. The line would be easily finished off with a set of heavy cruisers, and these ships were rightfully feared during World War II. Tier 7 would likely host the Trento, Tier 8 the Zara. Let's look at them in order. First, the Trento. Trento was the first heavy cruiser built by Italy as a result of the Washington Treaty. This ship was designed to be fast, 4 dual-barreled turrets mounted with 8 203mm 8-inch guns, standard for heavy cruisers of that tier range. They're mounted 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Her broadsides also host 4 100mm guns each. Her AA is alright, but I'd be willing to put up with that in light of her good guns and great speed. She could reach 36 knots if she had to. Trento-class cruisers at Tier 7 would be faster than any of their counterparts, with great firepower. Seems like a really good ship. The Zara looks even better, if you ask me. Zara represents the pinnacle of Italian cruiser design during the Second World War. They were built in lieu of the Trento, and Italian engineers wanted to alleviate that lack of armor. She got plenty of armor, a very thick armor belt, a deck of 70mm, and well-protected turrets. She had the thickest armor of any cruiser in the world until the American Des Moines was made. And she still had a respectable amount of firepower, the same 8-inch guns mounted in 2 dual-barreled turrets front and back, like the Trento. Her secondary batteries were also improved by having additional 100mm guns for 8 to a broadside, which is very, very good, and her AA isn't too bad. As far as speed, she clocks in at about 32 knots, so slower than the Trento, but at Tier 8, this is still pretty quick. Zara is well-armored, fast, and well-armed. Be wary, enemy destroyers and cruisers alike. Tiers 9 and 10 in this line are a bit difficult in terms of finding designs that existed in reality. I'll let Wargaming figure that out. All in all, Italian cruisers are all about speed and firepower, and would serve as great ships to hunt enemy destroyers and wounded enemies. They can also put up good fights against contemporary cruisers. But that, my friends, is a general overview of what you can expect an Italian tech tree to look like in World of Warships. There's seriously so much stuff on offer that Italy could add to this game, and I'm looking forward to seeing their vessels implemented. Of course, the British will precede them, and that will take a good period of time to accomplish, so Italy is way, way down the line, but like I've said with the Brits, I'd rather have Wargaming take their time and do this right. But before I finish up, I'd like to extend my thanks to a guy from the EU forums. Demon93 has put a ton of effort into compiling accurate and detailed information on everything about an Italian tech tree. Hell, you'll probably get more out of his writings than you would watching this video, so I highly encourage you to head to his thread in the forums and read up on some of the stuff for yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. I got a good deal of research information from him, so thanks a lot, man. Also, thanks to my buddy Matt for getting me some sexy gameplay footage of him in his Cleveland for the background footage here. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more like this. And for my Italian viewers out there, grazie. Thanks so much for watching.